how I've grown into the man that I am, you'll never outperform your own self-image. Go back to my dorm and I would throw up my lunch. I never thought you were going to play here.
Failures are going to be a part of life.
Welcome to the Manhood Understood podcast.
Going on, son?
Nothing much. Pretty excited for our talk today. Feel like I won't get as in deep into it, but I feel like I got some pretty good opinions on this, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Nice. Me too. For our listeners out there, welcome back to the Manhood Understood podcast, where we explore what it means to grow, lead, and live with purpose from one generation to the next. For those of you who may have not caught it, we had our first guest on last week, Ryan Mickler from Order of Man, and his exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council. Ryan's a trusted friend, a brother in the war to reclaim masculinity, and a mentor and a big reason for this podcast. So if you haven't seen it, go back to last week's episode and check it out. Today we're pulling insights from a book that I read years ago and have revisited several times and just recently reread it. It's one of the first kind of self-development books, and that's Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. This book changed the way I see myself and how I've grown into the man that I am. It was written back in the 60s, but it's applicable just as much today as it was then.
Do you want to get into, because I'm not even familiar with the book, do you want to get into some of the major points of the book? Yeah, so the theme of the book is, and I don't know that Dr. Maxwell Maltz ever says this, but the theme of the book for me is, and I use this a lot, is you'll never outperform your own self-image. And what Dr. Maltz discovered was that he was actually a plastic surgeon, and what he discovered was that some people's image of themselves and how they performed in life and what would change based on procedures they did, right? So if they were unhappy with their nose, they were unhappy with their ears, he would do the procedure and their self-image would change. But then other people, that wouldn't happen. So he realized it was more than just the physical changing. There's something inside had to be changed. He calls it the servo mechanism, I believe. I'm not smart enough to understand or explain it all, but I believe today we would call that our reticular activating system. So it's just about the mental picture you carry of yourself, how you think, how you act, succeed, how you fail. And then what Maltz noticed was that even after fixing someone's face, they still felt ugly inside. So I think that's a good kind of synopsis of the book. Yeah. Well, I think perception is reality, right? So if you're always perceiving yourself one way, then that's going to become your reality. For sure. And you know, our brains, we get what we focus on, and our brains are almost like a guided missile. And Maxwell Maltz talks about this in the book. It locks onto an image, or you give it, or how you see yourself. So if you see yourself as a failure, your actions will follow. If you see yourself as a success, your actions will follow. So that the idea is to change that self-image into somebody who's capable and successful. Do you think if you see yourself as a failure, that other people are going to see you that way too? Or do you think there's any correlation between what you think about yourself and what other people think about you? Yeah, that's interesting, because I always say that I wish we could see ourselves the way other people see us, right? I don't think we have a realistic image of ourselves sometimes. I think it's human nature to focus on the negative. You know, I can tell you every failure I've had in life, but sometimes it's hard for me to come up with successes. And that's not because I haven't had successes. I have had many successes in my life. And one of the things that Maltz talks about is falling back on those past successes, right? Failures are to learn from. Successes are what you carry with you, right? So failures have to be momentary. You experience them, you learn from them, and then you move on. The successes you put in the vault for later on. But to answer your question, no, I don't. I actually think, you know, a lot of us are good at hiding what we truly believe in ourselves, right? Like we don't really always portray how we feel inside. So I think more often than not, people see us more favorably than we see ourselves.
Why do you think so many people choose to focus on the negatives about themselves instead of the positives?
That's a great question. I think because the negatives hurt more, right? We focus on the hurt and we worry more, right? We're I think our human nature, and this may go back thousands and thousands of years, is we're always looking for threats, and the failures are threats. Right? Failure, we see failure as a weakness and a threat. And back in the day, but thousands and thousands of years ago, if you were the weak link, you got, booted from the tribe, right? So I think it's part of our nature, but I think, the failures hurt, so they stick with us longer.
How do you think we go from here then? For somebody that's always thinking in the negative, how do we? Because I think it's hard to say that you're just going to wake up one day and then, oh, now you're all of a sudden just positive.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, and Maltz talks about this in the book, visualization, right? He calls it the theater of the mind, and we have to visualize ourselves being successful, and we have to, when we're feeling down or we're feeling like, hey, things aren't going our way, we have to go back in the vault to those past successes and bring that feeling back, right? It's not just this isn't a woo woo, that book, The Secret, or the movie, The Secret, believe it and you'll make it happen. You can't just say, oh, I am a positive person, I'm a successful person, right? You have to visualize it, but then you have to follow it up with action. But once you start visualizing that you're the type of person that takes action, you're the type of person that succeeds, whatever it is that you're struggling with, I think you start to believe it. Again, we get what we focus on. So if we're focusing in our brains on the example I always use is, when you get a new car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, right? Before you bought the car, you never really noticed other similar type vehicles or similar vehicles, same make vehicles. And then once you get it, you see it everywhere. So we get what we focus on. So if we focus on in our brains and in our minds, and again, what Maxwell Maltz calls the theater of the mind, the positive stuff, we'll get more of that and we'll start acting that out in our life. But the important part, I think, is the action part, right? With action comes clarity. If all we do is think about it and don't take any action on it, then it's never going to become who we are. I call this head, hands, and heart alignment, right? And people have said that before, but I usually hear in head, heart, and hands alignment. But I'm very specific on the head, hands, and heart alignment, because it starts in your head with an idea, right? You start doing this visualization, this theater of the mind, and then your hands come into play. You got to start taking action. And then once it's in your mind and you start taking action on it, it becomes part of who you are in your heart. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is a little bit of a crisis in young men. I mean, I think I hang out with younger men than you do, so I get to see it a little more.
Did you just call me old?
Well, if you're my father, you got to be at least, 25 years older than me. Probably average. So
I'm 31 years old, and I just said, do the math.
Yep. You're a little bit above average.
I like that. I am above average. You're right. That's the self-image I hold of myself. I am above average.
Yeah, well, I think it ties into what we talked about with our three main problems with young men today, of giving up before we even start and just always having that negative mindset of, oh, I can't even do this, before you even try. You don't value yourself enough to think that you're able to do something that's going to be hard. Right? I think when we see things hard, we automatically think like, oh, I can't do it, even though the majority of things worth doing and being successful, it's going to be hard. I don't think any of it's really going to be easy.
Yeah, you're spot on. Anything worth doing is going to be hard. Anything that's truly going to make you feel good about the success is going to be hard, right? We do talk about celebrating the small wins and the easy stuff, but that's just the beginning, right? That's the beginning of the hands part, right? So when we work with men in the Iron Council or when speaking to you as my son, I'm going to encourage you to start taking small steps to experience those successes and then go to the big. I think one of the mistakes we make is even with visualization, right? We visualize the world, right? I'm going to change everything. I saw this a lot when I owned the gym. People would come in and they'd be coming off the couch and they'd be 50, 60, 75 pounds overweight. And they'd say, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to start eating clean. I'm going to start sleeping 8 hours a night. And I'd have to slow them down a little bit because I think you set yourself up for failure when you do that, right? You have to start small, right? So if the first step is, hey, I'm going to go to the gym every day. All right, great. Once we get that going, let's pick one thing we can remove from your diet and start with the nutrition stuff. And then once we get the nutrition stuff down, it's like, all right, let's start, forming a nighttime routine where we're getting you in bed at a decent time and getting you that 7-8 hours of sleep you want to get, right? And probably should start there, but that's for another podcast, right? Sleep is probably the first thing you should start with. But the point is I think we have to train our brains to expect success. And one of the ways we do that is by celebrating small wins and stacking small wins, right? We stack the small wins for big victories.
I think a lot of people expect to see this big change overnight or in a short period of time. So when they don't see that and they see that it's going to take time and like you're saying, you got to break it down into smaller steps. When they start to see that, it's when they start to get discouraged and, maybe this just isn't for me. And it goes back into that instant gratification we talked about on our social media episode.
Yeah, I mean that's just training your brain and changing the mental loop, right? And that's the part of the theater of the mind, the visualization. We have these ideas and thoughts in our head that we want it now, we want it right away, and yes, social media and just our world in general plays into that. And in some ways, it's great, right? Like, you can put a meal in the microwave and have lunch in 2 minutes. As opposed to spending 20, 30 minutes to cook a meal. So I think there's some advantages to that, instantaneous world we live in now. But I think when it comes to success and long-term success, we have to have a little bit of patience and a little bit of perseverance.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just taking the leap, right? Going back to our earlier point of just not even wanting to try and do it. Sometimes you just got to be willing to do it. And if you fail, you fail. Because if you fail, you're no worse off, right? You're where you started. But if you succeed, now you're stacking those wins.
Yeah, I think failure is part of life. I think failure is something that everybody has to get used to. I don't know if accepting is the right word, but the inevitability, is that a word? That failure is inevitable, right? We're going to experience some failures in life. Every successful person will probably tell you they've experienced more failure than they have success. They just kept after it. That's the key, right? And that's where the visualization and the theater of the mind comes in, because it's real easy to give up when you experience failure, but kind of get down on yourself. And so depending on how you look, if you look at yourself that, oh, I'm a failure. No, you're not a failure. You have failed, right? It's just an event in your life. It doesn't define who you are. And part of this theater of the mind and this daily visualization is seeing yourself that way. You got to picture yourself as confident, kind, resilient, and that no matter what happens, you're going to keep moving forward. I think back in my life to just a lot of experiences, right? I don't know if we've talked about this yet on the podcast, but my college football experience. I was told by my high school football coach that I couldn't play college football, specifically that I couldn't play college football at the college I wanted to go to. I knew I wanted to go there, right? And if I believed that, and if I didn't have a self-image of, even at that time, and it wasn't, I would say, I wasn't the most confident kid, but I wasn't, you're certainly at your age more confident than I was at my age, but I had enough belief in myself that I knew I wanted to at least try. Right. But he didn't want to help me try. He turned his back on me. And, for some people that would be discouraging, and maybe, they'd believe that. Right. But I had this self-image that I was going to go to Westchester University and I was going to walk onto that football team and I was going to try and play football there, fast. And when I got there, there was plenty of people that didn't think I should be there, right? I think one of the reasons that they even let me walk on, I was what you'd call a preferred walk on. So I got invited to camp that freshman year. Didn't have to wait till the spring to walk on, but I think it was because Grandpa was an alumni there. They kind of threw me a bone and threw Grandpa a bone. And when I got there, my first 2 years there, I don't think many people believed that I deserved to be there, but I did, and I had some doubts. I started to doubt myself my sophomore year. I got redshirted my freshman year, which was not that big of a deal because we came in back then. They would bring in almost 100 kids they brought into my freshman class. And I think all but 2 or 3 got redshirted. So, all the guys I came in with got redshirted. So there wasn't any kind of difference between me or them. But then my sophomore year, those same guys started playing, started traveling with the team. And I didn't travel with the team the first maybe 2 or 3 games and maybe even more. I don't remember now, but that was disheartening for me. Right. And I'll tell you, and I've told this story, maybe not on the podcast, but I've told it before, is on Fridays. Friday was usually a travel day. We played on Saturdays. I'd go to the cafeteria and have lunch with all my buddies that were on the football team, and they would all leave to go, travel to the game, get on the bus, travel to the game. And I would go back to my dorm and I would throw up my lunch because I was so upset that I wasn't traveling with the team. And, there was a time where I started to doubt myself and started to believe that maybe I didn't belong here. And I went to one of the coaches, and you just met Coach Matta a couple weeks ago at homecoming, at Westchester homecoming, and he is without a doubt. I was thinking about it after we spent some time with him. He is without a doubt in high school and football my favorite football coach. But I went to him because I knew he was the type of guy that would shoot straight with me, or I thought he would shoot straight with me, and you'll understand why I kind of laugh at that when I finish the story. So I went to him after football season. I remember it clear as day. It was in just me and him in the weight room, and I said to him, Coach, I just don't think I'm going to make it here. I'm thinking about transferring, moving home and transferring to one of the local Division III colleges by my house, Trenton State, William Patterson, and trying to play football there. And, he looked at me and he said, you know what? I don't think that's a good idea. I think you'll be fine if you stay here. And that was the encouragement I needed. Right. And now I saw myself as somebody, well, if Coach Matta believes in me, I got to believe in myself, and worked my ass off that rest of that winter in the weight room and had a great spring ball. Actually got hurt at the end of spring ball, but I remember Coach Tony. I think you've met Coach Tony a few times. He was the D-line coach. Yeah, he was the D-line coach at the time, and he said to me, "Don't worry about it. You had a great spring so far. I seen what I need to see. Rest your shoulder for the rest of the spring ball." And went home that summer, worked my butt off in the weight room with Uncle Kevin, put some size on, and actually wound up getting myself into the rotation, right? The starting rotation. We didn't have a starting D-line per se. We almost had like platoons where 4 guys would play one series and then 4 guys would play another series. But after a one game, and I don't remember the game. I don't even remember. I must have had a good game because I was sitting there taking my cleats off outside the locker room, and Coach Matta comes running up to me, grabs me by the shoulders and starts shaking me. And he says, "I never thought you were going to play here." And in my mind, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're the reason I'm still here. You told me a year ago, right? And so the point is, it emphasizes the point is what we believe, right? I didn't necessarily use the theater of the mind or visualization to change my self-image, but I went into that meeting with Coach Matta, or that conversation with Coach Matta, with this self-image that I was not a Division II college football player, that I wasn't going to play here. And he put it in my brain, whether, listen, I have no doubt that came from a good place. In his mind, he probably thought, Jay, you're not even going to be able to play at the Division III school. Right. But so you might as well just stay here because this is where you wanted to go to school and get your degree. But he changed the self-image, right? That changed my thought pattern of, I can play here. Somebody believes in me, right? I started working my ass off and acting as if I was a Division II football player, acting as if I deserved to be here, as opposed to feeling like I don't deserve to be here and kind of being a victim, right? Instead of being a victim and going home and, putting my tail between my legs and sulking, I stepped up, I changed my self-image, and I wound up, lettering for 3 years, was all conference my senior year. So, I believe that, that experience has affected me. And this goes back to what Maltz talks about celebrating your past successes. I now know, like, I almost enjoy being in the underdog position now, right? In the position of maybe you don't necessarily deserve to be here. And I'm experiencing that a little bit right now, at my current position at Del Valle University, right? I'm a college wrestling coach. Again, I think we may have talked about this in the podcast, but on paper, maybe I shouldn't be there, right? But I have a belief in myself that I know what I bring to the table. I know what I have a self-image of myself. I know what I bring to the table. I presented that to Coach Lammer, and he bought into it, and now I'm there, right? And now it's up to me. I have some growing to do, but listen, you never want to be in a situation where you're like the smartest person in the room, the most knowledgeable person in the room. Just in the 3 weeks we've been practicing at Del Valle, I'm a better wrestling coach. If at the end of this season, for whatever reason, I don't continue at Del Valle, I don't foresee that happening, at least not in my mind. Hopefully Coach Lammer feels the same way. And I go back to coaching at the high school level, I will be a more successful coach. I will have grown by putting myself in this position. Like, I think if I had asked a lot of people, and I didn't ask anybody, maybe your mother, certainly your mother, for advice on whether I should try and be a Uncle Kevin, I think I did, right? And they both encouraged me to go for it. But, it was just this belief that in myself, right? And that's something that over the years I've cultivated.
I think, like you said, failures are going to be a part of life. And oftentimes, those failures are when we grow. I think your story hit that pretty spot on, right? Like, when you're successful and you're not having a hard time, there's no room for growth there, because there's no perseverance or grit that you have to go through. But when you're going through those failures, it forces you to have to learn along the way. And another part of it is that you have to accept failure, right? Not, oh, I'm going to fail at this, but you have to be okay that if you try something, there's always a possibility that you're going to fail, right? You're never striving to fail. You're always striving to succeed, but succeeding, at least in my experience, is a lot easier to navigate if you accept that, hey, this may not work out.
Yeah. Dan Gable's high school wrestling coach, and I must have read this in one of Dan's books. Coach Gable, like Dan, like I know him. Coach Gable's book, but his high school wrestling coach had this philosophy. He would tell the kids, win with humility, lose with dignity, but don't lose. Right. And I think that kind of sums up what you're saying. Like, listen, the reality is, even Dan Gable, right, lost one match in his college career, right? Cal Sanderson didn't lose in college, but when he got to the international level, he was successful, but experienced some losses, right? Like, losses are almost inevitable, right? And it's how you deal with the losses or the failures that really define who you are. When all we are is successful, if you don't have something else driving you, like how often do we see people who are naturally talented not live up to their full potential? Because there's nothing driving them, right? When things come easy to them all the time, they think that's the way the world works, and then they don't. When they do experience failure, right? Because again, I do think at some point we all do, even the naturally talented, once in a while we'll have setbacks. We all too often we don't see them handle it well. We don't see them lose with dignity, right? It's the people who maybe aren't naturally talented, who have to work for those successes, who have to really dig down deep for those successes. I think they're the ones that really truly learn to lose with dignity.
Yeah, it provides you with something to fall back on. If you've never had a failure in life, and you're 20 years old and you fail for the first time, you're not going to know how to handle it.
Yeah.
But if you've been able to go through certain situations where you had to just kind of put your head down, accept it, and move on from it, then later in life it's just gonna become secondhand nature. Like, all right, we've been here before. Let's turn this into a win.
Yeah, I think as a father, it's important for me to have let you and your siblings experience those failures, right? I think all too often in this day and age, parents trying to protect their kids from failing or losing, or, we see it in sports, right? The don't keep score. That's complete bullshit. Everybody gets a trophy. That's complete and utter bullshit, and we're failing our children by doing that. We truly are, and I believe so strongly in that's just a complete fail of society, that we've now got to this everybody gets a trophy, everybody feels good. It's just not the reality of life. It's setting our kids up for failure. And listen, it's there's levels of parenting, right? From like 0 to 7, 8, maybe 9, 10, 7, 8, I'd say. And I stole this from Andy Andrews, but from 0 to 7, and I'm not saying it necessarily the same way he is, but this is kind of where I got this philosophy. We have to do everything for our kids, right? We do have to protect them from themselves. From like 8 or 9 to like 12 or 13-ish, we got to let go a little bit. We got to let them fall, right? We got to let them try and ride that bike and fall and scrape their knee. And then from like 12, 13, 14 to like 17, we really got to almost let the reins go, right? Again, we got to make sure they're not going to hurt themselves, right? If they're not going to do something that's going to, if even at 17, if you're standing, well, listen, at 20, if you're standing in the middle of the road and you don't see the car coming that's about to hit you, I'm going to run out and get you out of the way, right? But my point is we have to, as parents, as fathers, it's important. And in our context, Manhood Understood, as a father to a son, we have to let our sons experience a little failure. We have to almost sometimes, especially when things if you have a son where things come very natural to them, you have to almost kind of set them up for failure, right? Get them do hard things with them. Let them experience those hard things. Let them, I think back to the Garden State 5K and that picture of you crossing the line and you're in so much pain, but like you grew from that, right? You realized getting through that 5K run was difficult for you, but I think it helped you grow from it, right? It's why I took you and your brother on that Tour de Shore bike ride from Philly to Atlantic City. I want you to experience hard things and experience successes and experiencing failures, right? The Tour de Shore was not a complete success, right? We had to get on the bus for a little while, but what did you learn? Perseverance, right? Because we got on the bus for a little while, we rested, and then we got back out and we finished the ride, right? So what did that teach you? It taught you to persevere, to slow down, right? To take a rest, but to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that entire 5K race, I was thinking we're going way too fast. About half a mile in, I started realizing.
Yeah,
but I didn't want to slow down, slow everybody down.
Well, yeah. Well, you're in your defense, you were what, 12, maybe, and running with grown men who had been training quite regularly at that point, right? That was probably almost 10 years ago now, I bet. Right. But then think about the time we did the Travis Manion 5K, right? You crushed that. You could have went back and, right, if I remember correctly, you were.
No, so that's another time I came out too hot. Me and you were going, you were keeping good pace, but then I like hit a runner's high for the first time ever. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go faster. You're like, all right. And so I got way out ahead. And then all of a sudden, because we were running like under trees in the shade, so it was cool. And then it opened up and the sun was just beaming.
That was a hot day.
And I was like, yeah, so you got to the finish line, saw I wasn't there, and you turned back and we finished the rest together.
Okay. All right. I didn't, now that you're saying it, I remembered it, but there's a lesson there too, right? And that coming out hard and fast, I see that all the time with guys in the Iron Council. And again, it goes back to the gym. Like, it's a lesson there. And yeah, we all want to come out hard and fast. And I got to learn that lesson. I'm running the Marine Corps Marathon on Sunday. And I know that my tendency is going to come out hard and fast. And I am just not, like, my strategy is to find the 9 minute, 30-second pacer, get behind him or her and run those first 6-7 miles right behind them. And then maybe see if I can turn the jets on a little bit. But I think it's a good lesson in life, right? It's a good lesson for you to learn, is that coming out hard and fast, and, default aggressive is great. And I think that's always good when you don't have an answer, but you also have to have a plan, and then you have to work your plan, right? And I have a pretty strategic plan for this weekend, running wise, and if I don't stick to it, then I'll probably setting myself up for failure.
Yeah, to your point on the default aggression, you kind of have to, you got to direct it in the proper way, right? If you use your aggression from the start, you're going to end up like me. You're going to have to walk the last half. But if you know you have that in you, you keep it in your back pocket, you hold on to it until the right time. You use it properly.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that goes for anything in life.
100%.
All right, Dad, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, so I think as a wrap up, we'll just kind of reiterate the tools that we talked about, and I think there's one or two that maybe we didn't hit that in deep or maybe at all, but that I'd like to go over. So one that we did talk about is that daily visualization, right? That theater of the mind, Maxwell Maltz calls it. And what you're doing there is you're picturing yourself as the man you want to be, confident, kind, resilient, whatever it is. And what's important there in this next one, journaling, I think is a good tool for your self-image. We didn't talk about this. I'm not a big fan of journaling myself, but what I am a big fan of is writing down your vision on paper. And I think the two go hand in hand, right? Because what you're doing when you're journaling or writing your vision on paper is writing about your ideal self in the present tense, right? It's a trick of our minds. Again, our minds don't really differentiate between past, future, positive, negative. So you write in your journal, or you write your vision in the present tense, and you write it in a positive tone, for lack of a better term. You write what you do want, not what you don't want, right? So, I am focused, I lead with integrity, stuff like that. But again, I'm not a big journaling fan. I've tried it over the years. It doesn't really resonate with me, but I am big in writing out your vision for your life. The other one that kind of goes along with this is affirmations. And we talked about this a little bit. But I think we hit on affirmations a little bit, but you got to say them with emotion, and you got to follow them up with action. Your brain responds to feelings, not words. So if you're kind of, lackluster in your affirmations, right? Affirmations are powerful. I am confident, I am strong. And you saw for years, I had those sticky notes on my desk, and they were affirmations, but they have to have feeling behind them, and you have to have a belief in them. And how you do that is with action. And then the last one we did talk about, I think, quite a bit, celebrate the small wins. Every time you act in line with your new image, you have this self-image of yourself, and every time you act in line with that, you have to acknowledge it and celebrate it. And then that's how you build momentum, right? Small successes create big victories.
I think we pretty much hit everything. I think it was a good topic today. I think, would have liked to have a little more time, but got a little bit of life going on here, so.
It happens, right? It happens. We got it in, and appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today, and just keep moving forward and becoming the man you were meant to be.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate all the support so far. If you like this episode, make sure you go check out all our others. See you next week, Dad.
All right, son. We'll see you next week.